Thank you for joining us on today's Renewed Minds. This edition is brought to you by Church on Main, a welcoming and affirming church that is a safe place for you to be loved and accepted because we believe that's what Jesus wants us to do. Contact Church on Main at office@churchonmain.church for more details. We'll be discussing challenges and opportunities that we all face, no matter what season of life we're in. Our hosts will offer some practical tips we've learned over the years and also share how love and grace can help each of us while we're trying to maintain hope. Today in the studio, we have Tanya Dinkle, owner and coach of Life and Action Coaching, and me, our host, Steve. But today's topic is, who shall I be today? Have you ever woken up and asked yourself, who do I want to be today? Every day we step into different roles as a friend, leader, colleague, mentor, even a quiet observer. We shift our behaviors and tones and mindset depending on who we're with and what's expected of us. But how much of that is intentional? How much is just habit? So in this episode, we're wondering how well we really balance authenticity with the demands of different social spaces like work, friendship, and community. So let's unpack these questions and the more of this as we explore the power of choosing who we want to be today.
Wow, that's a loaded question, isn't it?
In the snow, right. We're
In the
not in our
snow.
studio today, so we're we're remotely doing this from our home studios, quote.
Yes, and they're very loose air quotes, our home studios. Yeah, we are adapting and we are finding out who we are today.
That's right.
So, um,
Maybe not the best remote technicians in the world, but we're making it work. So.
we're making it work. We're using the gifts we have, right?
Yep.
So yeah, this is a fun question, and actually, so this episode is going to release on February 17th, which happens to be Who Shall I Be Day, which I'd never heard
Very
of
much so.
until I was doing
I
some
didn't
research
either.
for this. But how cool is that? Um, so yeah, you pose some really good questions, like who are we going to be, and there's a lot of variables that we'll touch on today that impact who we're going to be, and it's not a one and done either, right? It evolves over time. So
It involves every minute sometimes, I think, based
does.
on the situation we're in and
It
who we're
does.
with.
It does. So let's dig in. So we'll start with Who Shall I Be Day. So the actual day is a day focused on self-reflection and future aspirations. So looking back and let's look forward. It's a chance for individuals to pause and think about their goals and the paths that they can take to achieve them. If you think about it, we're in February now. We were just talking about New Year's resolutions or promises we're making to ourselves for the new year. And here we are again looking at a theme of conversation around being able to reflect back and plan ahead.
Right. Yeah, it is interesting that maybe we don't take that time as much as we should. We just kind of run. We think we run on automatic. We're
Yeah.
probably not most of the time.
Yeah, I think you're right. We don't intentionally take the time to do the reflection and to think about where we're going so that we can make sure that those steps that we take are intentional steps, and that's important, right? Because I think that the big thing that, as I was thinking about today, that I want to make sure that people walk away from remembering is that we were made on purpose for a purpose. Now, maybe it's multiple purposes. We were just talking a few minutes ago about how it changes, right? Who
Right.
who we want to be can change throughout the day. We certainly have seasons. The person I want to be now at the age I am today is very different than it was 20 years ago. And that's okay because I've evolved. I've changed. My life has changed. My space in life has changed. And all of those are good things and good reasons to continue to walk forward. But that means 20 years from now, hopefully I'm still here, it's going to look different again, right? From what it is
Yep.
today. And the person I want to be will be different then.
Truly, it's we do mature, gain a little wisdom, gain
Hopefully.
some experiences, right?
Yes,
As we
hopefully.
go along the day,
Hopefully we're
right?
learning. Yeah, learning and applying
Yeah, it
those
was
learnings.
learn and
Yeah.
we do have gifts. It was interesting, the first time I really had to focus on this was my first job when I was in management. And so I was working for a restaurant, and they sent me to a Dale Carnegie course. That
Ah,
is really interesting to get you to focus on, how to win friends and influence people. That's what it's all about. Is how
yep.
to be authentic when you're doing this and still get your job done and do it well and be sure that you are the leader you want to be. So one of the things is to learn how to listen. I mean,
Mm,
it's really important. If you don't listen, things don't go well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The best leaders are some of the best listeners for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Another thing we have to remember, and I'm just going to keep going on this authenticity line that you've started, because I think you're so right. That's a great place to, if you can kind of center yourself anywhere in figuring out who you're going to be today, starting with being authentic wherever you are
Hmm.
is always a great place to start, right? So
It
if you're
is.
authentic in who you are, it's kind of like telling us a story. um it's much easier to tell a story that is true and honest, and it feels authentic, for lack of a better word, than it is to make up a story and then keep up with the story that you made up, right? And all of the
Right.
things and places that can go. It's just much easier to just be genuine, be who you are in that moment, own that. And sometimes that's scary, but own that, and share that. It's much easier to um, be able to kind of continue down that path if you're doing it with authenticity. When you are being authentic, it is much easier to use discernment in figuring out where you should be and who you should be with. We talk about peer pressure in life a lot, and for those younger listeners that we may have out there, spoiler alert: peer pressure is not something that only happens when you're young. It happens all the time.
True.
And social media has not helped that. So I
Hmm.
that my heart still hurts for these younger generations who don't know a world prior to social media. It can be used for really, really great things, and it can be used for really hurtful things as well. But if you are grounded in who you are as a person and what you believe, in who God made you to be, that purpose that He put into you when you were woven together, then it is much easier to, kind of step out of a situation for a minute and go, is this really where I want to be? Is this a group that I want to be around? Is this a group I want to associate with? Is this group filling me up? Are they filling my bucket, or are they draining more than what they may be putting in? And if they are filling the bucket, are they filling the bucket with things you want to be filled with? Are they filling your bucket with positive, affirming, encouraging words and actions? Or are they filling you with self-doubt and negativity and criticisms and the things that, we need developmental feedback, right, throughout our life, but we also need positive affirmations that we are doing things right. Not all things all the time, for sure. We're human. We're gonna struggle and we're gonna fail occasionally, but we don't fail all the time, right? So making sure that we've got people in our corner who are encouraging us and loving us, there has to be some sort of balance there, at least a balance there, to make sure that you're not getting overly weighted down on things that can really be harmful to you.
Oh, I agree. I'm gonna spin back to the authentic because everything you're saying is outstanding and to get your handle on. But the question is, how do you originate the
Hmm.
authenticity that you're supposed to be?
Yeah.
Obviously our life experiences have got there, but you and I are grounded in a little bit different situation
Mhm.
based on that we have a belief in Jesus and God, and so
Yeah.
it's given us a different perspective. Not a lot of people have that type of perspective to look at and help you direct what authenticity really is to you.
Yeah, it's funny. I think a lot of people do. I think that we've talked about how, um, how mainstream, I'll call it mainstream religion, because I think this is not, a denomination specific challenge, but I think, we've talked on and off of this podcast about how, church attendance has declined and, over recent decades, and how people are not, claiming or being quite as vocal with their spiritual beliefs that maybe they were 20, 30 years ago. Um, and I mean, I remember those, the revival times of the
Mhm.
80s.
Yep.
And, I grew up a Baptist, and, certainly associated with the Baptist church now, but have been in other churches too over my lifetime. And at the end of the day, I still, regardless of the church that I've been associated with, to your point, Steve, there is a foundation that I believe that I was created by God, again, for a purpose. I'm still figuring out what all of that purpose is, which is kind of the cool part, right? Because he gives us little
Yeah.
tidbits and like
Mhm.
like little breadcrumbs along the road for us to pick up
Right.
and know that we're on the right
Mhm.
path.
Yeah.
Um, but he gives us this really, really cool instruction book that we can go to anytime, and he tells us stories. Here's a really cool thing that it took me a long time to realize this. This book of stories that he gives us tells us the same stories in different ways. So you're reading,
Mhm.
you're like, oh, that's a kind of a cool story. And then you're, 3 or 4 chapters down the road, and there's the same story again, and it's got a slightly different, it's still the same message. It still means the same, but
Mhm.
it's presented differently. And I
Right.
love that he pulled that together in such a way that it really is geared to help anyone understand what he was trying to share. And if you haven't picked up on it yet, that book is the Bible that he gave us. And
Yes.
um and I just love that we have this manual. And of other podcasters that I listen to, will say things like, if you think you're hearing something from God, if you're not sure, if this tug that you're feeling, or this thing that you're hearing, or affirmations that you think you're getting, like if you're questioning, is this just me in my head, or is this God? And hey, been there a lot. Go to the Bible. Is it in the Bible? And if he is not ever going to tell you, or pull you to do something that you can't find somewhere in the Bible that he has done for someone else, right?
Right.
Not going to have your name associated with it unless you have a biblical name, which would be really cool and ironic. But I am not that fortunate. I do not have a biblical name. But
Right.
how cool is that we can go with, like, he's given us this really cool tool to be able to, in our very scientifically based secular life that we live into just every time we walk out the door, we've got this manual that we can go back to and say, huh, well, this is how we can kind of double check that, which
Yeah,
is
it's an amazing book, and if you don't understand the Bible, then you need to take time with it and continue to read it and read it over and over again. And like you said, depending on your focus that day, that focus that hour, you're going to read something that's going to touch you and give you a little bit more insight as to who you are. And a lot of the best self-help books are based on biblical principles.
oh,
Dale
absolutely.
Carnegie was, I mean,
Mhm.
the 12 steps of AA are.
Mhm.
There's so many excellent self-help books that have all biblically based instructions.
Yep, yep. So a couple of things about Bible, just really quick. There are a lot of different translations out there, and
Mhm.
some of them
Yeah.
are really hard to digest. Some of them are not. So I would say, if you are newer to the Bible, if you've never read the Bible before, that's okay. There's no rule about when you have to start reading the Bible. You can pick it up at
Right.
any time. It is always there for you. And if you put it down, you can go back to it later too. Like there's no rule around any of that. But I will tell you that a version or a translation that I tend to be going to a little bit more, even now, like in this season of my life, is the Message.
Mhm.
It just reads a little bit easier than some of the the King James version, or even
Oh, yes.
the New International Version. Christian Standard is another, for me, an easier one to kind of read through and translate. But if you're looking for something, just kind of know that there are translations out there that break it down in really clear, kind of modern day language, and they get the translation as close to what the original text was, I think, as they possibly can. Steve, you're talking about how, when you read a passage, it's going to resonate, one way. Now it may resonate, that same passage may resonate very differently later. Reminded me of when my mom passed. We were cleaning out her things, and I was had pulled out her. She had one of these the Bibles that you read through in a year, and it's broken out so that you can read the entire Bible through the year. And I knew that she had it. I knew that she'd done it. I did not know that she did it as consistently as she did. And what was fascinating to me is I would go through periodically, especially in that first year, and I would go, oh, well, I wonder what mom was thinking today. And I would go to that
Mhm.
day in the Bible, and I would see her notes, and I could see the progression over years of where she would be struggling with something really big, or she had a really big win and she was praising God for the things that he was doing in her life. And had she not made those notes, I would have never known what she was processing in some of those things. So the Bible can even be a way for you to kind of keep up with what's going on in your life. The margins are great. And there's, again, no rules in writing, or no rules against writing in the Bible. Make notes. Some of the greatest
It's
followers
just,
that I know have
it
done
is.
that
It's a
very
great
thing.
journaling tool, isn't
It
it?
is. It is. It is. It is. So there's a couple of different identities I do want to touch on, that people. I want to make sure that people understand the difference between them. That's a worldly identity and a spiritual identity. The worldly identity. This is a little more, I guess, probably secular in thought process, if you want to think about it that way. So this is the identity that we have outward, or that we have. Within the space that we live in our everyday. So physical characteristics, how we associate with the world that we live in, the world that's around us. And a lot of that is their physical characteristics. They might be socioeconomic status, like things like that, or more of your worldly identities. But when you start talking about a spiritual identity, that's really more, it's what's inside of us and how we take that and we turn it outward to do good in the world in which we live. So the two are not mutually exclusive. They are not the same, though. So I want to make sure that people are understanding that the spiritual identity really gets at identifying what it is within us, and how we connect with the spirit, and Steve, in our case, the spirit of God, how we create, or how we connect with that spirit and build that relationship so that it continues to deepen. And over time, we have been fortunate, I think, and others who've kind of been in similar paths probably have been too, where you continue to work through that relationship, build that relationship, and in times of struggle, wow, what a comfort that is to be able to lean on that. And we talk about faith. That's what faith is, believing when you can't see and leaning on it when you can't see it, but that will get you through, and it does. So that's, just understand that when we talk about identity, it's, who are you going to be today? Some of that is probably going to be worldly type of identity, and some of it is going to be spiritual identity too. And both are things that you need to be aware of, and making decisions about, as far as where intentionally you want to spend your time, your energy, and who you want to be in regards to those things.
Right. I totally agree with you. I would even hazard to say that I spiritual identity to me is a foundational to your worldly identity. If you have
Mhm.
a wishy-washy spiritual identity, it's
Mhm.
going to come out
Oh yeah,
eventually.
I would agree with that.
It'll happen, but your spiritual identity to me is the foundation that you need to start with if you haven't been there, or if you don't have a spiritual foundation. I strongly think you need to get that foundation first.
Yeah, yeah, and that's not something that comes overnight, right? So
No.
I was listening to a friend discuss the other day, and it was a comment that he made in a larger context of conversation, but he made the comment about when he was deciding if he was going to follow Jesus. And he was 19 and he was thinking about the things that he was going to give up and what he was going to get in return. And
Hmm.
and I just never thought about it that way. But for a lot of people, it is. It's very much a struggle of, these are the rules and the laws that I understand based on what the Bible or preachers or other faith leaders have told me over the years, right, wrong, or otherwise, depending on who you've listened to. But this is my perception of what I'm giving up. I don't know what other word to use that is so powerful, but what I'm giving up versus what I'm getting. And that is a huge struggle for people. And that's not something that I think you should ever, if you're struggling like that, you should not rush that. You need to take time. You need to have conversations with people who can help you understand clearly what is the Bible actually telling you. Again, if you go back to the context of the Bible, it's never going to lead you wrong. So what is it actually telling you? And can you buy into that? Does it resonate with what your internal spirit is telling you? All of those are good activities to go through as you're kind of figuring out spiritually what do you believe, and then how are you going to support that and supplement that going forward?
Right. And some people, and I would say, including myself in my earlier life, had to reset the thinking. Even though I was
Oh
grown up in
yeah.
the church, um, I don't believe that my maturity at that time allowed me to encompass everything I was hearing, and
Yep.
how to take all that into my personality. So you have to sit down and take a serious look at your life, and see what's going on, and you may just have to reset your thinking.
Yeah, resetting is super helpful. Super helpful. I mean, I remember I did I needed a life reset. It wasn't just a spiritual reset, but I needed a life reset a number of years ago. And I planned this getaway where it was just me, but I took my devotional Bible with me. And I intentionally spent time because I wanted to make sure that this life reset, even though there were multiple components to it, I wanted to make sure that part of it was really intentionally digging deeper in the word and understanding, because I had no clue what God had planned for me. I was not convinced in that moment, even though I knew in my heart that there was a purpose for me. In my head, I was struggling with that. I couldn't see it. I couldn't feel it. I couldn't understand what that purpose would be in that season. So I knew that I needed to dig deeper. I didn't know what the answer was going to be. And I didn't find the answer on that trip. But what I did do was that reset my head, it reset my heart. And I came back, which was the goal. I came back with a different focus that helped me continue to dig and dig in a way that, resonated with where I was and have continued kind of down that path. And you talk about resetting, thought processes on what you've been taught all along. I still do that. Like my husband and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and it's like, yeah, like I know that this is what I was taught as a kid in church. And I know that this is what I hear when I go to church. And, but here's the things that the pressures that we're getting from society. And as a female and having been in leadership roles and having very, very, very clear opinions about what I think, I should and should not be, I want to use the word allowed, but I don't think it's that I should be allowed to do anything or not allowed to do anything, but what I should have control over within my own
Right.
life. Like there's just so much debate and it's a lot of conflicting stuff there. How do I feel about that? And candidly, I'm still working through that. And that's okay because we are all a work in progress and we are a work in progress until we take our last breath. And I think if we're not taking advantage of the growth that can come as being that work in progress and we're not acknowledging that and leaning into that and living in that space, wow, we're really doing a disservice, not just to us, but to God who created us and gave us these gifts to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so in our notes, we were talking about a really distinct reset in life,
Mhm.
and so when Jesus goes, "You are going to have a little confrontation here, and you are persecuting my people, so
Yeah,
we're going to make you blind." That's
right.
a
The story of
drastic
Saul.
reset.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that was
you
pretty
don't want to go
drastic.
down that road.
That was. Yeah, yeah. Saul was on his way to Damascus, and he was supposed to for anyone who doesn't know the story, he was supposed to arrest anyone who openly was advocating for the works of Jesus Christ, right? Like, and the high priest was had sent him there to say that this is not what we should be doing. And he did. He got called out pretty
Right.
hard on the road, and yeah, he lost his sight as a result. But wow, through that experience, he got to learn what walking in faith was like, because in that on that road, in that moment, he was told, keep going, make your way, and more instruction will come. So he
Right.
had to walk in faith, and he didn't even believe when this happened, right?
Right.
Like this, there can be things happening in our life that we have no idea what's going on. But if you get this pull to just continue to take a step forward, continue to take a step forward, have a little
Right.
faith, trust that there is something positive to be gained out of it. Because what happened, if you continue to read the story, is he gets there, he ends up being saved, he ends up being baptized, he's doing all of these things spiritually, and he gets his sight back. Now, that's somebody could say, that not everybody gets the happy ending, and that is absolutely true. There are
Hmm.
tragedies that happen every day that we cannot explain, and at some point I think we will probably dig into on this podcast about, when it we've done some in the past, but maybe we'll get a little more deep into when things happen, and God doesn't fix it. We know he can, because he can do anything, but when he doesn't, what then? What do
Right.
we do with that? And that's hard as us for humans to kind of deal with that. But there is something of purpose in every experience that we have. Hopefully, we learn from it.
Yes. Hopefully, we learn from every step we take. Right.
Yep, exactly. So what are some things that we can do to make sure that we are being who we shall be for a day? So I think the first one, and this is one of my favorites, because it's renewing our minds, which
Hmm.
is our podcast, right? so
Right.
so do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12:2. It's what this podcast, the Bible verse that this podcast is based off of, is not conforming to the world around us, but really digging in, and figuring out who we are and who we want to be, and knowing that what we decide today may be different than what we would decide 10 years from now, or what we would have decided 10 years ago. And that's
Right.
okay, because we are supposed to be continuing to evolve in our faith.
Always. I mean, that's what we're called to do, because there's opportunities every day to see the needs in front of you
Yeah.
and to act appropriately.
Yep.
And we're given that gift to do,
Yep.
and you need to take that gift and use it, because if you're not, then you're not doing yourself a good service, and you're kind of doing a disservice to the rest of the community. You
Right.
have an ability, do it.
Yep. Absolutely. There's another thing we can do, and this is a word that has really carried a lot in my life and in my family in the last year or so. We look at each other a lot and go, choices. It's all about choices. And
Yes.
it really does boil down to the choices that we make. And I think acknowledging, being authentic in the fact that not every choice we make is going to be good. Right. We're
Mhm.
we're gonna we're gonna make choices based on the information we have at the time, and that may be incomplete. It may be incomplete at best, right?
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
there are some times that we get wrong information, and we need to make decisions. Some of that we are hopefully doing with as much faith as we can, and as much discernment as we can. But at the end of the day, there are choices, and not making a choice is usually not an option. At some point, we're going to be forced to make a choice to do something. Um, Sometimes the choice is to do nothing, but oftentimes the choice is to do something. And sometimes that something is a hard thing, no matter what you've got multiple options, and they're all hard.
Yeah.
And that's, again, there's opportunity there for growth in faith, in leaning on God, in leaning on your community of support, whoever and whatever that looks like. Those are the moments where we can really not only learn how strong we are, but the how vast our resources are that are at our fingertips
Right.
who love and care about us and want to support us.
Yeah, you bring up a good point as well about all that support. We're not in control of everything. We're hardly in
Mm,
control of most things in our household,
true.
but we're not in control of everything, and we need to recognize that that's an important vision. That you don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
You just don't.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. Okay, some practical steps. We talk a lot on this podcast about prayer and meditation. That is always. You probably, if you've heard us more than maybe 2 or 3 episodes, you know what I'm going to say. That is always a good place to start, right?
Always.
Always pray, meditate, do both. It's not an either or, do both.
Mhm.
Journaling is, we talked about it earlier. Use your Bible to start your journaling, but you can write, you can type, put notes on your phone, however you want to get those things out. It is it's so therapeutic to just get it out of your head and out of your body. And then one of the things I love about it, and it took me a long time to think about journaling this way, but once I write things out, then I can go back and not just look at them later, but there's just something about seeing it on paper or even on a screen that when I go to pray over it, it just makes that prayer feel different and it feels more authentic, interestingly enough.
It does feel very authentic. I think anytime you journal, it is a good learning tool. I know you and I probably during our educational time,
Hmm.
we different ways to study, and one way is to write it
Hmm.
down,
Yep.
maybe more than once.
Yeah.
And so journaling just brings it up to your eyeballs, into
Yeah.
your heads, into your heart, so you are better focused on that object or that situation that you're in.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Another thing we've talked about today is digging into the scripture. And, you know, technology, Steve, we were talking about technology and how wonderful it can be and how frustrating it can be before we started
Mhm.
recording, since we are
Yes.
really leaning on technology today.
Yes, we are.
But but I tell you, I mean, it is not uncommon for me to go to Google and say, I need a Bible verse that talks about this, and it does
Mhm.
it. Again, technology can be used for such wonderful, wonderful things. And if you're struggling with something, don't hesitate to, you don't have to just go to a Bible that you hold in your hand and flip through and find it on your own. Use the resources to available to dig into the area where you're needing help. Now, I will tell you, in the back of Bibles, there are indices that will tell you based on topic. You'll see that in a lot of Bibles that say, if you're looking
Mhm.
for something on this topic, then go here. But you can also go to Google. That's a fast way to get it. And online Bibles are a fantastic resource too. So, and I use both personally. So I don't know, Steve,
Right.
what you do, but I use both. I like the ones I
I
hold in
use
my hand, and I
both.
like the ones on my phone too. So it just kind of
I use both. And
yeah.
there's good things in the Bible that are technically, like one I have what I'm trying to say is, has multiple versions in it. So if you
Oh
don't
yeah.
like what you're reading in the current version, you can flip to another version, which might give you a little more insight. Mhm.
Yeah, I love how you say that. So I'm going to tag on to that. If you don't like what the Bible's saying, first of all, you may not like what the Bible's saying because it may
Right.
counter what you would wish it would say.
Yeah.
But if you're not understanding what the Bible is saying, which is common depending on the translation that you're looking at, yeah, those Bible apps are great because you can just flip to a different translation. And I've done that even through some Bible studies that I've done. You
Mhm.
know, there's one that I've been working through that actually says, this is the translation that we are using when we are writing this study. So I know that, when it says write down this Bible verse, that's the version that it's coming from. But I don't always get it. And I'm like, okay, I'm still confused on that word. So
Mhm.
pick a different translation and go see what it says there. So you can definitely flip around. And then
Yeah, since you and I don't have haven't studied Greek or Aramaic, so we don't
no,
quite understand what the real meaning of the word
no.
is. So getting
Some
those
days I
different
feel English
versions
is
is
enough of a
wonderful.
struggle. So yeah. Okay, and then obedience. So early on, we did a podcast, and Steve, I think you can link it here on this as well, on this episode as well. But
Yes.
why it's good to obey, and
Mhm.
obedience is not a bad thing in all contexts. So thinking about it from a healthy setting, right? You are physically safe. You are physically in a good space, obeying what God has to tell you, and building that into your rhythms is a really healthy, scary thing, because He does challenge us to do things that are not comfortable. But
Mhm.
that's how we grow. That's how we grow in our strengths and in the gifts that we have. But it's also how we grow in our faith.
Right. It's you're right. Obedience is scary.
Yeah.
It connotates some very negative situations that comes to our mind initially, but when it's based in love and grace, it's pretty good.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that generally comes when we're going through these steps that we've talked about, how we can be more of the person that we want to be, is obstacles, and those usually come in the form of doubt, fear, or just complacency. And I think of those three, probably fear is the easiest one to kind of wrap your head around. Change is hard. Change is scary. Change is not always bad, though. And even
Yeah.
though it's hard, um, it is almost always worth it. And even in hard situations, and I've told people this for years, just through coaching sessions, of, look, change is, it's usually hard, it's usually very uncomfortable, and it's usually good. And once it's all done, but that's all based on the context, right? So if you're going through a situation where maybe there's a change happening in your job and you're not excited about the change, you don't feel that the change is good for you, maybe even you lose your job as a part of this change, we are tempted to think, well, this isn't a good change, right? But think ahead to what can happen beyond that moment. It could lead to a better job. It could lead to an experience for you to lean into your strengths harder, more intentionally, because now you've got the time to do that. That can be wonderful change.
Mhm.
It can be scary. It can absolutely be scary. But again, going back to the prayer, the meditation, the journaling, leaning on scripture, leaning on your community of people who build you up and pour into you, not just pull out of you, can help you through those seasons. Seasons of wilderness, they're often referred to.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes quiet from God, but that's where we grow.
Right. Yeah. The other thing that comes to mind is pride. Sometimes
Mhm.
we can be so much in the high pride situation that we
Yeah,
deny there's an issue.
that's
And
true.
if you deny there's an issue, then overcoming the problems that you're dealing with are almost impossible.
Yeah, yeah, right. We have to get over ourselves first, right?
We do.
That's the thing about faith too, and just building a deeper walk with God. I have personally found is it really humbles you.
Mhm.
I remember at the beginning of 2024, I just had this really weird feeling that it was going to be a rough year for me personally. Professionally, I felt like it was going to be a rough year, and I remember in articulating that, the only way that I could really explain it to people was, God's going to test me. He's going to test my faith, and he's probably going to knock me on my butt so that I can figure
Mm.
that out, because I tend to be a
Mhm.
little stubborn. So, but and he did, he absolutely did. But he also cushioned the fall.
Mhm.
And I do firmly believe that is because I was intentional in the path that I took from the time that I got that kind of tug through the events that that were to happen, and then beyond, and well into now, and I have every intention of continuing to on this path, because it's worked really well for me so far. But
Yeah.
it's humility is that's a tough one sometimes.
Right. And we know that you and I both stand on the statement that you can do all things through Christ who strengthens us,
Absolutely.
because we know that we believe in higher power, and we believe that perspective changes us and gives us an accountability, and know that things will go as determined for us, or helps give us that direction.
Yeah. Yep. All right. So what do people do now? So just a couple of reflection questions for you. If you are a believer, or if you are um, kind of contemplating the idea of belief in a higher power, I would say, how do you think God sees you? And again, there is a ton of scripture out there that you can put your hands on that will actually answer that question. It comes directly from the Bible of how God sees you.
Hmm.
I can promise you that whatever the answer is to that question, however you think God sees you, I can promise you He sees so much more. He sees
Hmm.
so much more in you than what you see in yourself. And then, what areas of your life do you think need transformation? And again, this requires some of that humility, Steve, that we were just talking about. It requires
Yes.
authenticity that you started us off with, and just some introspection on who do we want to be, the type of person we want to be, what's important
Mhm.
to us, what are our values, and how can we live out the purpose that we've been created to do. And then that's probably my guess is, if you're like me and lots of other folks, as you think about what needs transformation, that's a lot of stuff. Or at least for me, it was a lot of stuff. So how do you take on a big project? You do it a little bit at a time, one
Mhm.
thing at a time, and don't expect perfection. Grace, you talked to, or Steve, you talked about grace just a few minutes ago. Have grace
Yep.
with yourself. It's harder, I think, to have grace with ourselves than anybody else. But in
Yes.
periods of
Mhm.
transformation, it's critical, because it's not going to be perfect. It's a work in progress. We are a work in progress.
Always.
Yeah, always. Right,
And I'm
exactly.
glad of it too, because I think I'm getting better, or at least my perspective of me is getting better.
Yeah,
Still a lot
yeah.
of things to work on, but I
Hey,
like the progress.
yeah, exactly. And I love that perspective. That's awesome.
Mhm.
Well, missing our co-host today, but this was a good conversation as always.
Yeah, it was an excellent conversation. Yes.
Yes, yeah. So we'll go ahead and wrap that up for today. We do thank you guys for investing your time in our messages. We are grateful for each and every one of you. If you found today's episode to be helpful, please like and subscribe and share it with other people. We'd love to get the word out about our podcast. If you'd like to join the conversation, or if you have questions for myself, for Steve, or even for Tommy, who is not here today but is still very much part of the team, please email us. You can reach us at renewedminds@churchonmain.church. We hope you make it a great day and approach every day with a renewed mind.
Yep. And don't forget, you can also contact with us on Instagram at renewedminds.connect.
I always forget about the Instagram now. Very cool.
Yeah, it's we need to just push it more to get
Yeah.
people comments on there, but it's getting more looks. So don't forget, you can find us on all major podcasts as well as YouTube. So check us out. Hopefully, this brings a renewed perspective to the challenges and opportunities you're facing today. What steps will you be taking to show love and grace to everyone? If you have any questions or comments about our podcast, please send an email to renewedminds@churchonmain.church. You may also leave comments on Instagram at renewedminds.connect. Thanks for taking time out of your day to join us. Listen next week for the next Renewed Minds.